The K-9's betrayal. Officer Jake Reynolds tightened his grip on the leash as he gave the command. Get him. His K-9 partner, Diesel, a massive Belgian Malinois, lunged forward, muscles coiled like a spring. The suspect, a wiry man in a torn hoodie, tried to bolt, but he wouldn't get far. Except he did. Diesel charged, but instead of clamping his jaws around the man's arm, he skidded to a stop just inches away. His ears flattened, and a low whimper escaped his throat. Then, to Jake's utter shock, Diesel nudged the suspect with his nose, almost like he was greeting an old friend. What the hell? Jake muttered. The suspect crouched down, hand outstretched. Hey, buddy, he said softly, scratching behind Diesel's ears like he'd done it 100 times before. Jake's gun was drawn in an instant. Don't move. The man slowly stood, hands raised. But his eyes weren't on Jake. They were locked onto Diesel. He remembers me, the man said with a sad smile. I trained him. Jake's heart pounded. That wasn't possible. Diesel had been with the force for years. But then it hit him. K-9s were often trained by private handlers before they were assigned to officers. You're lying, Jake said, voice sharp. Am I? The man reached into his hoodie pocket, slowly, pulling out a frayed, chewed-up leather tug toy. Diesel's tail wagged. Jake felt the ground shift beneath him. His K-9, his partner, wasn't just hesitating. He was remembering. The man let out a breath. His name wasn't always Diesel. His gaze met Jake's. It was Ranger. And before you, he was mine. Jake's grip on his gun faltered. This wasn't just some random suspect. This was a ghost from Diesel's past. And now, Jake had to decide, was this man truly a criminal, or was there more to the story? Jake hesitated, then slowly reached into Logan's pocket. He pulled out the USB and glanced at Diesel, who sat beside Logan like he belonged there. If you're lying, this won't save you, Jake warned. Logan nodded. I know. Jake exhaled and pocketed the drive. You're coming with me. We'll check this out at the station. As he reached for his cuffs, Diesel whined, ears twitching. A second later, tires screeched in the distance. A black SUV sped toward them, its headlights blinding. Logan cursed. They found me. Jake barely had time to react before the SUV's doors flew open and masked men jumped out, guns raised. Gunfire erupted. Jake dove behind his cruiser, dragging Logan with him as bullets ricocheted off the pavement. Diesel barked furiously, crouching low, ready to defend. They're not here to arrest me, Logan panted. They're here to erase me. Jake gritted his teeth. He didn't know if he could trust Logan yet, but one thing was clear. Whoever these guys were, they wanted him silenced. He clicked his radio. Officer under fire. Need backup now. Before dispatch could respond, Diesel growled. A deep, guttural warning. One of the masked men was creeping closer, silencer attached to his pistol. Jake's instincts kicked in. Diesel, get him. This time, the K-9 didn't hesitate. Diesel exploded into action, his powerful frame a blur as he tore toward the masked man. The would-be attacker didn't even see it coming. Diesel's jaws snapped shut around his arm with a sickening crack, pulling the man to the ground in a flash. Jake didn't waste a second. He fired 2 shots into the air to get the other's attention. Stay down, he yelled at Logan, who was still crouched behind the cruiser. Logan's face was pale. You don't understand. They won't stop. They've been hunting me for months. Jake's heart was pounding, but his training kept him sharp. The remaining men were regrouping, trying to flank them. Diesel was holding his ground with the first attacker, but there were still 4 more to deal with. Jake's mind raced.
He needed to buy time.
He pulled out his gun, peeking over the hood of the cruiser, and fired a warning shot into the air. Back off, he yelled. The men hesitated for a moment, but then, without warning, one of them sprinted forward, closing the gap. Jake fired again, grazing the man's shoulder, sending him stumbling back. Damn it, Jake muttered under his breath. They weren't going to back down. Diesel barked once more, a warning, before charging toward the nearest attacker. The man swung his gun, but Diesel was faster. He leaped, knocking the weapon out of the man's hand and sinking his teeth into the attacker's leg. Logan crawled over to Jake, his voice low but urgent. "The only way out of this is to destroy their operation. They'll never stop hunting me or Diesel." Jake met his eyes, realizing the truth in his words. These men weren't just hired guns. They were part of something much bigger, a covert operation with far-reaching consequences. And if they didn't act fast, they might not make it out alive. The SUV that had dropped the attackers was still idling, its engine humming ominously. Jake had a plan forming, but it was dangerous. "Listen to me," Jake said, eyes locked on Logan. "You get Diesel out of here. I'll hold them off until backup arrives." Logan shook his head. "You don't know who you're up against. This isn't just some gang. This is something worse. These people, they own people like us." Jake's grip tightened on his gun. "Then it's time we give them hell." As Logan sprinted toward Diesel, who was still holding down the first attacker, Jake moved quickly. He dropped to the ground, using his cruiser as cover while he made his way toward the SUV. The remaining attackers were distracted by Diesel, who was keeping them at bay, and Jake used that to his advantage. He reached the SUV in seconds, silently sliding his gun under the door handle and forcing it open. Inside, there were files scattered across the seats, documents that could expose everything. But Jake knew he didn't have time to go through them. He grabbed what he could, files, a few phones, and sprinted back toward Logan, who was helping Diesel restrain one of the attackers. "Get in the car," Jake shouted. Logan hesitated, but quickly complied. As the engine roared to life, the attackers regrouped, but it was too late. Diesel, still panting and growling, jumped into the back seat next to Logan. Jake slammed the door shut and jumped into the driver's seat. With a screech of tires, he threw the car into drive, slamming the accelerator down. The SUV, still occupied by a few of the attackers, roared after them. But Jake wasn't going down without a fight. He swerved, narrowly missing a bullet that shattered his side mirror. "We need to get to the station," Jake said, his voice grim. "But first, we need to lose these guys." Logan nodded. "I know a place." As they sped through the streets, dodging traffic and gunfire, Jake realized this wasn't just about saving his life or Logan's. They were up against an enemy that had been hidden in plain sight, and the truth was far darker than he'd imagined. The sound of screeching tires and bullets whizzing past them filled the air as Jake pushed the car harder, swerving through narrow alleyways and darkened side streets. He glanced at Logan, whose face was a mix of fear and resolve, holding Diesel's harness tightly in his lap. "They won't stop, will they?" Jake asked, his voice tight with the tension of the chase. Logan shook his head.
No.
"They'll keep coming until they're certain I'm gone. And trust me, they have resources, big ones. Whoever's behind this, they control everything. The department, private security, even the media." He swallowed hard, looking out the window as the flashing lights of the... Jake's mind raced. The man wasn't lying. He could sense the depth of the conspiracy, the layers of corruption that Logan was caught in, and now, in some twisted way, Jake was part of it. But there was no turning back. "Where to?" Jake asked, eyes darting between the rearview mirror and the road ahead. "Head toward the docks. There's an old warehouse down there. It's off the grid. They won't expect us there." Logan's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he glanced at Diesel. "I've been there before. It's the last place anyone would think to look." Jake nodded and made a sharp turn, heading toward the industrial side of the city. The van behind them wasn't far behind, and their headlights flickered in the rearview mirror. He needed to act fast. Suddenly, Diesel growled low in his throat, ears flat against his head, his body tensed. Jake's hand instinctively gripped the steering wheel harder. He could feel the K9's anxiety seeping into his own.
"What is it, boy?"
Jake muttered. Diesel barked twice, his eyes glued to the rearview window. Then, as if in response to Diesel's warning, the black van sped up, closing the distance. The headlights glared brighter and brighter, now directly behind them. Jake's heart raced. They weren't just chasing them now. They were about to make their move. Logan turned toward the back of the car, his face grim. "They've got someone else. Not just shooters this time." Jake's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Logan's voice dropped to a whisper, the weight of his words sinking in. "A tracker?" Jake's eyes widened. He knew exactly what Logan meant. Someone was in that van with the technology to track their every move, and it was only a matter of time before they'd be cornered. We need to ditch them now. Jake slammed his foot on the accelerator, pushing the car faster, harder, as the industrial zone loomed ahead. He swerved left, narrowly avoiding a group of parked trucks, and then right, skidding onto a less traveled road. Diesel barked again, his alertness nearly palpable. "Stay close, Diesel," Logan murmured. Jake's knuckles turned white on the wheel. "We're almost there. Hold on." The van was still tailing them, but as Jake approached the entrance to the docks, a plan started to form in his mind. He knew the layout from years of patrolling the area. There was an old maintenance tunnel by the far end of the pier, a dead end that no one used anymore. If they could get there without being followed, they might just lose the van. He floored the gas, speeding down the narrow road, his pulse thundering in his ears. The van was gaining, but they were almost there. The tunnel entrance came into view.
"Now,"
Jake yelled, turning sharply to the right and slamming the car toward the darkened tunnel. The van was too close. They wouldn't make it. Then, at the last possible second, Diesel did something unexpected. He leaped over the back seat into the cargo area, his eyes locked on the rearview mirror. With a sudden bark, he launched himself through the rear window. "No!" Logan shouted in panic. But it was too late. Diesel had already leapt onto the van's windshield, paws smashing against the glass as it screamed toward them. The van's driver swerved wildly, trying to shake off the K9, but Diesel's sheer force had them skidding sideways. In that brief moment of chaos, Jake seized the opportunity. He slammed the car into the tunnel entrance, tires screeching as they made a sharp left, disappearing into the dark, hidden from view. The van wasn't far behind, but the entrance to the tunnel was tight, and the blacked-out area was a maze of old industrial buildings and decaying infrastructure. They had lost sight of the van, but Jake knew it wasn't over. The moment Diesel jumped onto that windshield, the game had changed. He turned to Logan. "We've bought some time, but we need to figure out what we're up against." Logan's eyes flickered to Diesel, who was now panting heavily, his fur matted with debris from the van's windshield. "You don't realize it yet, but you're in the deep end now, Jake. These people, they'll stop at nothing to get what they want." Jake exhaled, clenching his jaw. "Then we make sure they don't get it." The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were now in this fight together, whether they were ready or not. The tunnel stretched ahead, dark and narrow, and the silence that followed the chaos outside felt like a weight pressing down on Jake. The headlights flickered as they cut through the inky blackness, the only sound Diesel's low growl as he sat protectively in the back seat. Logan, too, was tense, his hand still gripping the seat as he stared ahead, his mind racing. "They won't let us go this easily," Logan muttered, eyes darting nervously toward the rearview mirror. Jake's grip on the wheel tightened. "No kidding. But we've got the advantage for now." But deep down, Jake knew they didn't have much time. The men chasing them wouldn't just give up because they'd lost sight of them for a few moments. He had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. Ahead, the tunnel split into two directions. The left path led deeper into the industrial district, where a few abandoned warehouses could hide them for a while. The right path led toward the old piers, which were often used for illicit activities, and Jake knew it like the back of his hand. If they went right, they'd be closer to the exit, but there was also a high chance they'd run into more trouble, especially considering the kind of people after them. "We take the right," Jake decided, his voice firm. Logan didn't argue. "Good. We'll need to make it to the old shipping docks. I know a place where we can hide, at least for a few hours." Jake didn't slow down, pushing the car forward into the dark expanse of the right tunnel. Diesel's ears perked up again, and for a moment, Jake thought he heard a faint noise from behind them. The van was still on their tail, a distant hum in the dark, but it was gaining speed. "Hold on," Jake warned, as he swerved left into a sharp turn that led them onto a cracked, narrow road. The old piers were just ahead. The headlights from the van grew closer, reflecting off the edges of the tunnel. The sounds of their pursuit grew louder, more aggressive. Whoever was driving that van wasn't going to let them escape without a fight. Logan turned to Jake, his expression hardening. They know these docks better than anyone. We need to be ready for anything. Jake glanced at Diesel in the rearview mirror. The K9 was alert, his body tense. Diesel knew they weren't out of danger yet, and Jake could feel the same gnawing anxiety creeping up on him. These people wouldn't stop at just chasing them. They'd want answers. And if they couldn't get answers from Logan, they'd find another way. They reached the docks just as the van skidded around the corner. The lights of the van flashed in their rearview, illuminating the entire area. The concrete was cracked and uneven, littered with old crates and rusty equipment. It was a place no one would look, but now, with the van so close, Jake felt the heavy weight of their urgency. He slammed the brakes and veered left again, turning into a hidden alley between two long-abandoned warehouses. Diesel barked once, then crawled over to the window, sniffing intently at the air as if sensing something beyond just the men after them. Jake slowed the car to a halt, cutting the engine. "We need to be quick," Logan urged, his voice low. Jake took one last look at the approaching van. "We go on foot from here. Stay close." Logan nodded, reaching into the glove compartment to grab a flashlight. He handed it to Jake before quickly exiting the car. Diesel followed them out, his stance alert. Tail rigid, they slipped through the alley and moved toward the edge of the docks. The dim light of the flashlight bounced off the concrete walls, illuminating an old access door to a rusted warehouse. Logan walked up to it, and without a word, he pulled out a small key, unlocked the door, and swung it open. "We'll be safe in here for now," Logan said, stepping inside. The warehouse was dark, the air thick with dust and the scent of old wood. They crept through the shadows, and Logan led them to a set of stairs leading down into a small basement area. Just as Jake was about to follow Logan down, Diesel stopped at the edge of the stairs, his body stiff, growling in the direction of the access door. "Stay alert," Jake whispered, sensing the shift in the air. Diesel's instincts were sharp. Suddenly, there was a soft thud, a muffled sound of footsteps approaching. "Get down," Jake hissed, pulling Logan into the shadows as they crouched low. They held their breath as the footsteps grew louder, closer. Logan's hand brushed against Jake's, his fingers tense. The door to the warehouse creaked open, the light from the outside flooding into the dark space. A figure emerged, a man dressed in dark tactical gear, a silencer attached to his weapon. He moved slowly, cautiously, as if hunting something. Diesel, still growling, bared his teeth, but Jake held his breath, hoping the man wouldn't hear them. The footsteps halted just a few feet away from them. Jake's heart was in his throat. It was only a matter of time before the man noticed something wasn't right. And if that happened, all hell would break loose. The man paused, looking around the warehouse, his eyes scanning the dim surroundings. Diesel let out a low growl, a sound that sent chills down Jake's spine. But before the man could take another step, Jake made his move. He shot forward, faster than the man could react, knocking the gun out of his hand and slamming him against the wall. Diesel leaped into the fray, sinking his teeth into the man's arm, holding him in place. Logan quickly grabbed the man's weapon, pointing it at him. "Who are you?" The man's eyes went wide with panic. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You're dead. Both of you." Jake didn't wait for the man to say more. He nodded to Logan. "Tie him up. We need answers." Logan dragged the man to the center of the room, securing him with some old rope lying nearby. Diesel remained close, his body tense, ready to react. As the man struggled, Jake moved toward the door of the basement, ready for whatever was coming next. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And they were running out of time. The man squirmed on the ground, his eyes wide with panic, but Jake didn't let up. He kept his gun trained on the tied-up figure, his thoughts racing. This was the first real lead they had, but the man wasn't going to crack easily. Logan stood beside Jake, the tension between them thick. Diesel remained by their sides, his ears perked, eyes scanning the dark warehouse. The sound of distant engines hummed, and Jake could feel the weight of time bearing down on them. "We need to know who's behind this," Jake muttered, eyes locked on the man. "The van, the attack, everything. Who sent you?" The man spat, a bitter look crossing his face. You're out of your depth, cop. You think you can stop this? They'll come for both of you. They don't care about you, or this dog. All they care about is getting Logan back. Logan's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. Getting me back, he repeated, his voice tight. You're talking about the people who framed me, the ones who've been hunting me for months? The man laughed, hollow, dark. They want you alive for now, but they'll make sure you suffer first. You don't even know the half of it. Jake felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Who the hell are they? The man's eyes flickered toward the back of the warehouse, as though sensing something approaching. The Apex Group, he hissed. And you're just getting started. A sharp, cold wind howled through the open door as Diesel suddenly stood rigid, his body stiff with alertness. Jake's heart skipped a beat. They're here, the man said, a twisted smile creeping across his face. And they'll make sure none of you leave this place alive. The ground seemed to shake as the distant sound of heavy vehicles grew louder, now unmistakably close. Jake's pulse spiked as he turned to Logan. We don't have much time. Logan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Jake's arm. There's an emergency exit in the back. It leads to the sewers, then out to the city outskirts. We can use it to escape for now. Jake nodded, his mind already working on the next steps. All right. We move fast.
Get to that exit. Now.
As they turned to move, Diesel growled deeply, his fur bristling. The man on the ground managed a strained laugh. They've already found you. You're not going anywhere. Suddenly, the doors of the warehouse slammed open. 3 armed men in black tactical gear flooded inside, weapons raised. Jake's instincts kicked in, and without thinking, he fired a warning shot into the air. The men paused, but didn't hesitate long before returning fire. Logan cursed. We've got no choice now, run. Jake grabbed Logan's arm and yanked him toward the back exit. Diesel followed closely, his eyes scanning for threats. The 3 armed men began to close in, but Jake had already calculated the distance. He fired again, his shot striking the nearest attacker in the leg, sending him to the ground. We need to go now, Jake shouted as the 3 of them sprinted toward the back of the warehouse. The emergency exit creaked as it opened. They stumbled into the dark, damp tunnel, the faint echo of their footsteps disappearing behind them. Diesel's low growl reverberated in the tunnel, alert to the danger still lurking. As they ran deeper into the maze-like sewers, Logan slowed, wiping sweat from his brow. We'll be safe for a bit, but not for long. Jake looked ahead, the path twisting and turning in the darkness. How long do we have before they catch up? Logan didn't answer immediately. He just kept running, his eyes focused on the dark passage ahead. Diesel's ears flicked, and he growled again, but this time it was quieter, as if he sensed something even deeper than the danger they'd just escaped. Jake's heart thudded in his chest. He knew they weren't alone, not anymore. The Apex Group was relentless, and they'd be on their trail soon. But for now, they had a head start, and they were running out of time. The cold, dank air of the sewers wrapped around them as they sprinted deeper into the dark maze. The dim light from Jake's flashlight barely illuminated the narrow path ahead, and the sound of water dripping echoed in the silence. Diesel, always on alert, stayed close to Logan, his paws padding quietly against the wet concrete. Jake kept a careful eye on their surroundings, knowing they couldn't outrun there. Logan's breath was heavy, but his voice remained steady. We need to keep moving. They'll have drones in the air, tracking us through the city. We can't risk stopping. Jake nodded. The tension in his chest tightened. The Apex Group had resources, technology, and manpower. They weren't just ordinary criminals. They were organized, methodical. And if they had drones, they could be tracking their every move, even underground. Where exactly are we headed? Jake asked, voice low. You said this place leads to the outskirts. What's waiting for us out there? Logan glanced at him, his eyes dark with the weight of his past. A safe house. It's hidden. No one knows about it, not even the people I was running from before. It's my only chance to get us out of this. Jake didn't argue. He trusted Logan's instincts for now. Diesel suddenly stopped, his head tilted to one side as he sniffed the air. The hair along his back rose, and his eyes flickered toward the tunnel's bend ahead. "Something's wrong," Jake murmured, his hand tightening around his gun. Without warning, Diesel growled deeply, and Jake heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching from the darkened tunnel ahead. The light from his flashlight cast long shadows along the walls, revealing nothing but the twisted passage. "Get ready," Jake whispered, his voice barely a breath. He motioned for Logan to fall back. "Stay low." Logan and Diesel moved into the shadows behind him, as Jake crouched, gun raised, listening for any movement. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then silence. It was as though whoever was approaching had stopped moving. Jake's instincts screamed at him to be ready, but it wasn't until the flickering sound of a drone's propellers reached his ears that he realized what they were up against. They weren't just being tracked by people, they were being tracked by machines. "Logan, we need to move, now," Jake hissed. But Logan's eyes were wide with fear. "It's too late. They've already found us. We'll never outrun them." Jake felt his stomach drop as the drone's buzz intensified. It was getting closer. A pair of red lights flickered in the dark, bright, pulsing like the eyes of a predator. A voice crackled over a speaker from the drone, chilling and cold. "Logan Holt, you are not escaping. Surrender now, or we will eliminate all of you." Jake's blood ran cold as he instinctively pulled Logan deeper into the shadows. "Stay down. We have to take it out before they get any closer." But before he could react, Diesel let out a sharp, aggressive bark, and with a blur of movement, he dashed toward the drone. The mechanical hum of the drone's propellers intensified as it lowered toward the ground, but Diesel was faster. In one leap, Diesel lunged at the drone, his teeth sinking into the spinning blades. The drone sputtered, struggling in Diesel's grip, but the dog's strength was unmatched. With a vicious growl, Diesel tore the drone from the air, sending it crashing to the ground with a spark and a burst of electrical smoke. "Good boy," Jake muttered, his heart still pounding in his chest. Diesel stood over the wreckage, panting, his eyes still scanning the darkness. Logan exhaled shakily. That was too close. Jake didn't have time to process the near miss. "More are coming. They'll send reinforcements. We need to keep moving." Logan nodded, his eyes still wary, but now filled with determination. "Follow me. There's an old access shaft up ahead. If we can get there, we'll be out of their range." Jake didn't hesitate. He grabbed Logan's arm and pulled him forward. The air felt thick with the weight of their pursuit, and Jake could sense that time was running out. They pushed forward through the dark tunnels, Diesel leading the way. The faint glimmer of light ahead signaled the end of the maze, and possibly a chance at survival. But as they neared the access shaft, Jake heard a voice again, distant but clear. This time it wasn't from a drone. "You can't outrun us," the voice said, cold and unforgiving. "This is your last chance to surrender, Logan." Jake's eyes narrowed. They were closing in on them. Whoever was tracking them was relentless. But the only thing on Jake's mind was survival, and getting Logan the hell out of this alive. With a final sprint, they reached the access shaft. Jake pulled open the rusted door, revealing a dimly lit ladder that descended deep into the earth. "Go," Jake ordered, ushering Logan and Diesel through first. He glanced back once more, hearing the faint sound of footsteps and drones above them, closing in. With no time to waste, he followed, pulling the door shut behind him and slipping into the shadows below. They had entered the unknown, but Jake knew one thing for sure. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. The metal ladder creaked under Jake's weight as he descended into the darkness below. The air was cold and damp, thick with the scent of rust and decay. Logan and Diesel had already reached the bottom, standing in the shadows, waiting for Jake to catch up. Diesel's ears twitched with every noise, his keen senses alert to any movement. Jake's boots hit the concrete floor with a soft thud as he finally reached the bottom. He quickly scanned the surroundings, noting the narrow corridors that led off in every direction. It was a forgotten place, a maze beneath the city, an underground network no one had used in years. Logan took a deep breath and motioned for them to follow. "We're safe for now, but not for long." The access tunnel leads to the old subway line. There's a dead station near here, where we can lay low for a while. Jake nodded, keeping his gun ready, but he knew they couldn't stay underground forever. The Apex group had too many resources. The drones, the men in tactical gear, the voices on the comms, they weren't going to stop until they found Logan. How many more people are hunting you? Jake asked quietly, his eyes scanning the dimly lit tunnel. Logan's voice was low, almost distant. More than you'd believe. They control everything: cops, mercenaries, hackers. If you're on their list, they don't stop until you're gone. Jake felt the weight of the words. He had been a cop long enough to know that systems like that didn't exist without reason. And they were after Logan for something bigger than just revenge. He could feel the pieces of the puzzle slowly clicking into place, but the answers seemed too dangerous to fully understand. They moved down the corridor, Diesel at the front, his paws padding softly against the floor. The sound of their footsteps was the only thing breaking the eerie silence of the abandoned tunnels. Suddenly, Diesel stopped, his ears perked as he sniffed the air. Jake tensed, his hand hovering over his gun. Logan froze too, his eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Jake whispered. Logan looked at Diesel, then at Jake. "They're close. Too close. They must have tracked us down here." Before Jake could react, the faint sound of voices echoed through the tunnels, low, muffled, but growing louder with each passing second. "They've found us," Logan said, his voice steady but with an edge of urgency. "We need to move, now." Jake's heart skipped a beat as the realization hit. The Apex group was relentless, and now they were closing in on them, not just above ground but below, in the forgotten shadows of the city. "Where's the subway station?" Jake demanded. "Straight ahead. But we have to hurry. They won't give us another chance." The air felt thicker now, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Jake motioned for Logan to lead the way. They sprinted down the corridor, Diesel at their heels, his instincts sharper than ever. As they neared the entrance to the old subway station, the sound of boots pounding against the concrete floor behind them reached Jake's ears. It was too late to run. They were already here. "Get to the station," Jake barked. Logan pushed ahead, pulling open a rusted gate that led to the stairs down into the abandoned platform. Jake followed closely, but as he turned the corner, he saw a flash of movement in the distance, a figure emerging from the darkness. A tall man, dressed in black tactical gear, his face hidden behind a mask. The man raised his weapon, pointing it directly at them. Jake didn't hesitate. He drew his own gun, firing a shot that rang through the tunnel, but the man was fast. He ducked behind a pillar, his gunfire following in rapid succession. Jake dove for cover, pulling Logan with him as the bullets ricocheted off the concrete around them. "Get down," Jake shouted. The world seemed to slow as he assessed their situation. There was no way out. Not unless they fought their way through. Logan cursed under his breath. "We're trapped. This is it." Jake shook his head. "Not yet. We fight or we die trying." Diesel, sensing the danger, darted toward the pillar where the attacker had taken cover. His growl was low but fierce, a warning to anyone who dared to come closer. The masked figure fired another round, but Diesel was faster. With a blur of motion, the K9 lunged, sinking his teeth into the man's leg, throwing him off balance. The figure screamed in pain, dropping his weapon as he fell to the ground. Jake seized the moment. He rushed forward, gun raised, and in a single, fluid motion, he put a bullet through the man's chest, silencing him for good. Logan exhaled shakily, his face pale. "That's one down, but there's more." Jake's eyes locked with Logan's, a sense of grim understanding passing between them. They had no choice but to keep moving. The fight was far from over. "We need to get to the train platform," Jake said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We'll find a way out from there." They pushed forward, Diesel still on high alert, guiding them through the wreckage of the old subway station. The sound of distant footsteps echoed behind them, growing closer with every second. Jake knew they couldn't keep this pace forever, but they had to try. They reached the platform, breathless, their eyes darting to the darkened tunnels behind them. The old subway station, long abandoned, offered no refuge. The walls were crumbling, graffiti scrawled across every surface, and the silence was oppressive. Diesel, still tense, stayed close to Logan, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Jake stopped just at the edge of the platform, his pulse pounding in his ears. He could hear the sounds of pursuit growing louder. Their enemies were closing in. He turned to Logan, his voice low but urgent. "Do you have any more surprises up your sleeve, Holt?" Logan's face was grim, his eyes clouded with the weight of the situation. "The train's not running anymore. It's been abandoned for years. But there's a tunnel leading out through the maintenance shaft, one I used to use for emergency exits." Jake didn't have time to ask questions. The sounds of boots on concrete reached his ears, followed by the unmistakable hum of a drone flying overhead. "We don't have much time," Jake said, his grip tightening on his gun. "Lead the way." Without hesitation, Logan moved toward a rusted door near the far end of the platform. It creaked open, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel that led deeper into the earth. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mold was overpowering. But Jake didn't care. Every step felt like a race against time. As they moved through the tunnel, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were running toward a dead end. The Apex group had eyes everywhere, and they weren't going to stop until Logan was back in their hands. But Jake wasn't about to give up, not without a fight. "We're getting out of here," Jake muttered to himself. Logan's voice cut through the silence. "You don't know what you're up against. They'll come after you too. Once they have me, they'll make sure you're gone." Jake's gaze hardened. "I'm not leaving you. We fight together or we don't fight at all." They pressed on, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the narrow tunnel. Diesel led the way, always alert, his ears twitching with every faint noise. The further they went, the more Jake could feel the walls closing in. They couldn't outrun this. But maybe, just maybe, they could outsmart them. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small access door. Logan paused, checking the area for any signs of movement. "Here," Logan said, his voice tight. "This is it." He pushed open the door, revealing a narrow ladder leading up into the night. The cool air from outside hit them instantly, and for a brief moment, Jake allowed himself to breathe. But before they could climb, a voice echoed from behind them. Cold, commanding. "Logan Holt, you're not going anywhere." Jake spun around, his heart sinking. 3 figures stepped into view. 2 men in tactical gear, their weapons drawn, and behind them, the shadowy outline of a drone hovering just out of sight. The figure in front, the one who had spoken, was tall, imposing, and wearing a mask. His voice carried the weight of authority, and it was clear that he wasn't here for negotiation. "You've made this difficult," the masked man said. "But it ends here. Surrender now, and we might let you walk away. Fight and you die here. It's your choice." Logan stood frozen, the weight of the decision heavy in his eyes. Diesel growled, sensing the danger, his muscles coiled, ready to strike. Jake looked at Logan, his gaze firm. "We're not surrendering." Logan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "No more running. It's time to end this." In that instant, chaos erupted. The drone's engines whined as it surged forward, its spotlight blinding them. Jake fired, but the bullet missed its mark as the masked man moved with lightning speed, diving for cover behind a nearby pillar. Diesel was the first to react, leaping toward the nearest attacker with a ferocity that caught the man off guard. The two wrestled on the ground, Diesel's powerful jaws snapping at his throat. Jake didn't wait to see the outcome. He rushed forward, closing the distance to the remaining enemies. Gunfire rang out, and Jake dove behind the pillar just in time to avoid a bullet. He returned fire, each shot carefully aimed. Logan was right behind him, moving swiftly through the chaos. He reached the ladder first, pulling himself up as quickly as he could. Y ran into the night. The city was alive with the sounds of sirens in the distance, but it was too late. The Apex group had made their move, but so had Jake and Logan. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over until Logan was free. And for the first time in a long time, Jake had a feeling they might just win. The end.